I feel pretty sure that it's SMA. And I just remember like my whole world just crumbled because it was like, there's no hope. You know, this is a disease. There's no cure. This is not fixable.
Right.
And my biggest thing that I struggled with at the time was that Caleb couldn't play on playgrounds, because he couldn't walk.
Yeah.
And he was weak, and he had also lost his ability to crawl by that point. And so, like, I just wanted him to be able to play on playgrounds. I don't know why. I fixated on that.
Welcome back to the Leading with Vulnerability podcast. On today's episode, I have part 2 of my conversation with Kari Merriken. If you didn't listen to part 1, Kari shares some stories about when her husband was wounded overseas, and some of the, just what she's been through as a military spouse. And in part 2, she's going to get a little more personal, talk about her family, what it's like raising 2 children with special needs, and just some of the story behind all of that. So I hope you enjoy today's episode. And without further ado, we'll get into part 2 with Kari Merriken. Yeah, it's an amazing story. Like I said, if you haven't listened to that story, go listen to it. But we'll transition now and talk a little bit more about you and some of the life outside the military, which has also been a challenge, right? And you've had to show some resiliency. Both of you had. You talked about it. You lost your first child.
Yes.
You had trouble getting pregnant, I believe, right?
Right.
What was that kind of like? Not only, how long after you came back in the Army did that start? Did you guys start trying to have kids?
We started trying to have kids, or I came off birth control when we were in New Mexico. And then I was one of those girls that like always wanted to be a mom. Right. And so, but Kanan wasn't quite ready. He had a different timeline, which is a good thing. But so it took us a really long time, and I was starting to worry if there might be issues. And, we weren't those people that just got pregnant right away. It took a really long time. And then finally, I did get pregnant in, I think it was March 2006. I remember, and of course, everybody else around me was getting pregnant hard. And so I got pregnant, and I was just thrilled. And I went out probably like the next day or the next week and bought like baby towels and baby clothes. It was just everything I had hoped for. So I was just like,
over the moon.
This is it. Over the moon. Right. And so when I went in at, I think 7 weeks because I was having some spotting, and they told me they couldn't find a heartbeat. And I was like, no, this is
not happening.
You're wrong. Something similar had happened with my sister, where they same time frame, and they hadn't been able to find a heartbeat. And I was like, listen, same thing happened with my sister. It's going to be fine. Right. And then another doctor comes in, and I'm just like trying to find the heartbeat. They can't find the heartbeat, and they're all saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." I was like, "Why are you saying you're sorry? Stop!" Oh. And so they told me I could wait a week if I wanted to. And so I did. I waited a week. That was
a long week.
Second longest week of my life.
Yeah, wow.
And I remember going back out, and like as I was driving to the hospital to go have the ultrasound, like just this sinking feeling. Right. And I went, and not only could they not find the heartbeat, but my body had begun to break the baby down. And that was mine and Kanan's 3-year anniversary. And he was deployed.
I was going to say, was he deployed? He was
deployed.
Right.
That was his first deployment back. Right. And I had to have a DNC, because I didn't have like a miscarriage. And so I had a DNC procedure. And it was just a sorrow beyond description. Right.
And your husband's not here to
He did come home.
They did send him home though, right?
Yeah, I told him not to come home. He always does that. Always comes home.
That's good. That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
I know it's good. But he came home, and he was there with me going through that whole grieving process. Right. And it would just, I think it felt like such a greater grief because we had difficulty in getting pregnant. Right. And then, because I had wanted to be pregnant for so long, and then to just have this elation and for it to be over so fast. Right.
Did you at any moment just did you ever have the why me? Why, after everything I've been through, why is this happening to me type stuff?
Of course.
How do you get through that?
At the time, I have, I'm a Christian.
Right.
And so I have a really strong faith. And, at the time I leaned into God, and there are a couple of songs. I don't know if everybody else does that, but there were a couple songs that really meant a lot to me. One was by Natalie Grant called Miles. And it's just this story about, like there's a mother on her knees in this one place, and she's praying and begging for her son's life because he's just been hit by a car. And there's another mother on her knees that is, in the hospital with her baby that needs a heart transplant. And so like this one mom, is losing her son, and this other mom is getting a heart for her son. And just that dual nature of life, of that joy and sorrow right next to each other. And that song just really meant a lot to me during that time. And I really pulled heavily on my faith.
Yeah. So you went through all that. Kanan comes home.
Yeah.
And then you eventually get pregnant with Caleb.
Yes.
Right? So how did that all happen?
So that was really funny because, that was just a fiasco, because Kanan was like going all these places, and I'm doing fertility injections. We had actually been to see a reproductive endocrinologist.
Right.
And, I had some very like minor stuff wrong with me. Like it wasn't anything like you can't get pregnant. It was just like, we got to help you get pregnant.
Right.
And so I was giving myself injections, to do all the things in the abdomen. And
you do it yourself?
Uh-huh.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, there are women out there who have dealt with infertility and multiple failures. I am not in the league with them.
Right.
My bout with infertility was very short, and my first attempt at getting pregnant with fertility treatment worked.
Right.
And so I have that perspective. There are women out there who go through much, much harder things than that. So I did that. We were like coordinating when he was going to be home, because, he has to be home if I'm going to get pregnant.
Right.
And so we did like drawing out calendars and scheduling. It was so like, and he came home.
You better be ready, Kanan, when you get home from this one.
Right. And then, let's see, I remember, they tell you to come in, I think like 10 days after. Uh-huh. And they knew that I had, this is crazy. This is kind of a crazy statistic. I want to say I had about four, what are they called? I was going to ovulate 4 eggs,
right?
Because with fertility treatments, it's like a lot of follicles will develop to release eggs.
Right.
And so, like what happens if all 4
yeah,
get fertilized, and then we really are having triplets or quadruplets, And so I remember talking with the doctor with me about that, and I was like, I'm not worried about, And then when I went in at that 10-day, they did the blood test, and I think I want to say it was like October 5th or something of 2000. What would that have been? 2007.
Okay.
October 2007. Yep. Got the phone call, and they had done the blood test, and they were like, "You're pregnant."
Oh, wow. So what emotions come over you?
Oh my gosh.
Was Kanan there when you found out?
We were like driving in the car. I remember the moment, he was driving, I was riding, and I think we both kind of knew. We suspected it.
That's good.
And it was just totally thrilled. Again, over the moon again.
Right. So you got all the way through that pregnancy.
Yes.
Caleb's born.
Yep.
Right. And then Caleb has SMA. Right? Which stands for?
Spinal Muscular Atrophy.
Right. So, and you didn't know that going in. You didn't know that for a while after he was born. What did that kind of look like, and how did you discover all that?
No clue. And I mean, it's a really long, drawn out story, but I'll condense it just for the sake of time. But it was basically, because of the type that he has, there are different types. And just so everybody knows, it's a progressive neuromuscular disease that affects the motor neurons, which are the neurons you need for movement. They affect swallowing, breathing, crawling, walking,
right?
All of that. And so those neurons are damaged or destroyed, and therefore the muscles atrophy. And it's progressive, meaning it continues to get worse over time. And so neither one of us had ever heard of it. It's a genetic disease, so both parents have to be carriers.
Right.
just like cystic fibrosis.
Right.
You know, we've all heard of cystic fibrosis. You know, we get screened for it. But none of us, there was no family history.
No family
history that we knew of on either side. We were both carriers, but we had no idea until, you know, Caleb was diagnosed. And the really crazy thing about the type that he has is it's more moderate. I mean, that's so relative because it's debilitating. I mean, he's completely wheelchair bound. He cannot stand. He can't bear weight. I mean, so it's debilitating, but there's a more severe type. And so, but because of the type he had, the babies that have this usually follow their milestones pretty normally. You know, so he rolled over, he crawled, all on the right timeline. He was cruising, you know, he was doing everything. The only thing that was maybe a little bit of a flag was that he was really, really scrawny and skinny. And he like around a year, they were saying he's failure to thrive. And so it was really more a workup of why is this kid not gaining weight at first? You know, there wasn't really you know, he wasn't walking at 1, but that's not that unusual, you know?
Yeah, no. So when did you finally find out? Did you have to go to a bunch of specialists to figure out?
We went through to so many doctors over so much time. And it was just a matter of like, we finally saw a geneticist in Atlanta who said, you know, with what Caleb has, here are the 3 main possibilities. And one of them was spinal muscular atrophy. And so we went through the process of getting him tested. And then he was hospitalized because he still wasn't gaining weight. So he saw a GI doctor. This was around his 2nd birthday. I was on the way to visit my sister. And on the way, I stopped by a GI doctor who wanted to hospitalize him on the spot.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I mean, it's his birthday, you know, so can we wait? You know, I'm going to see my sister for a week. Can I come back on the way back, you know, and can we stop then? And so she hospitalized him. And that was the thing she said, you know, we don't know what's wrong with him, but I'm not going to let him just waste away.
Right.
She was a great doctor.
Yeah.
She just stepped up and was like, we're going to find out if we don't have to find out what's wrong, but we're going to get some meat on his bones, you know? So she got an NG tube ordered, and, you know, as he's in the hospital, this adorable little 2-year-old, you know, and he's getting all this, you know, all this testing, and it was hard, but it was like we were finally getting somewhere, you know?
Right. Yeah, getting clarity, but it's...
Right.
And then when did the actual diagnosis happen?
So the neurologist came into the room and had to do these tests, which... they're not as bad. I mean, you may have you had an EMG before?
No.
You know, an EMG is where they put the little needles in your muscles and try to like make them do stuff. I've had one, and they're not super painful, but they're uncomfortable. And so they're doing this to a 2-year-old little boy, and, you know, can't explain it, you know, and he's screaming and crying, and I'm a wreck. And she did something called, I think, a nerve conduction study. And when she finished her testing, I remember her looking at me and saying, I feel pretty sure that it's SMA. And I just remember, like, my whole world just crumbled because it was like, there's no hope. You know, this is a disease there's no cure. This is not fixable.
Right.
And my biggest thing that I struggled with at the time was that Caleb couldn't play on playgrounds, you know, because he couldn't walk.
Yeah.
And he was weak, and he had also lost his ability to crawl by that point. And so, like, I just wanted him to be able to play on playgrounds. I don't know why. I fixated on that. And so I remember after she told me, I walked into the bathroom at the hospital, and I just... The dam broke. Oh. And I just cried and cried because it was that realization he's never going to play on the playground.
Oh, that's and Kanan deployed during this time?
So I'm trying to remember. He was deployed, yes.
During some of this process.
But he came home, and I don't remember if he was home in time for Caleb's. He was there. I know he was there. I just don't remember. I want to say maybe when I found out that he was going to be hospitalized, that I probably started the process to get him home, and that he may have been home by the time he was hospitalized.
So Caleb's 13 now.
Yes.
Right. I mean, your day-to-day is pretty full with him because he's wheelchair bound, and you homeschool both of your kids, correct? So how's that been the last 13 years taking care of him? And
well, he went to public school for the first until he was 10 through 5th grade.
Yeah.
And so that was really good because he had an IEP and he could get therapies at school. And also, that was a little bit of a break for me when he was at school during the day. Really, I would say probably for the first maybe 10 years, I was Caleb's primary caregiver.
Right.
I was just Dr. Mom. I was all over it. I did all his care. That was just the way I wanted it to be and the way it worked naturally because of Kanan and his job and everything that he was doing. And so, not to say that Kanan didn't help.
Right.
He helped.
Oh, yeah.
Babe, you helped. So anyway, it was just, I was very vigilant about, his respiratory therapy. This is kind of like a backwards, but when he got hospitalized when he was 5 because he was in respiratory failure. And that's when he started having to use, they actually airlifted him to Atlanta, but that's when he started having to use special respiratory equipment. Because with SMA, the kids or people that have SMA, they don't have an adequate cough.
Oh, okay.
And so you have specialized equipment. You have this like little vest thing that can like shake them up. And then they have like a machine that imitates cough. And they have all kinds of, they have great stuff. It's wonderful to have this because, before, you did a lot of manual CPT where you're like beating on their back and stuff. And so it's great to have all that equipment, but it's a lot to do. It is a lot, yeah. And so, those are kind of like the day-to-days of what we do with him. And now, so he has a standing frame. It used to be he had a standing frame that we would take him out of his wheelchair and put him in a standing frame. But now his wheelchair will go to a standing position, which is wonderful. And so we have to, get him standing. He's got to have his braces on to do that. He's got to do his specialized respiratory equipment every day for maintenance. And then if he's sick, like just constantly, because we're clearing those secretions. We're getting those because respiratory issues are what really is dangerous for any person with something like that.
Yeah. So COVID comes along. That had to be
right. Yes.
Quarantine the house type stuff.
Yeah.
That's just amazing that you do all that. And we could probably talk for hours just on all of that in the process. But there's some treatments that you guys go to, right? Down in Orlando.
So, and that kind of is a good segue into Harper, because Harper's our second child. She's 6, and I'm not going to go there yet. Just give me we'll get there. But Spinraza is a treatment that was in development. It was actually in development at the time Caleb was diagnosed and had been in development for some time. I don't think they were calling it Spinraza then. But it was approved by the FDA like Christmas 2016. And it's not a cure. Mm-hmm. It's fantastic. It's doing so much for the kids that get it when they're diagnosed early and receive it early. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's totally altering the trajectory. Right. But for kids like Caleb, where so much of the damage is already done, it's more like they're looking at it as maybe stabilization or slowing down the progression of the disease. Right.
And you go down there. How often do you have to go down there?
So both kids go every 4 months, which winds up we go every 2 months. But we've kind of worked out this thing now where I go with Harper and Kanan goes with Caleb.
Oh, okay. And we'll get into we'll talk about Harper and what kind of leads up to that, because that's kind of crazy. Okay. So there was a small percentage chance that even though you both carry the gene for SMA, that it would still that Caleb would get it, right? Mm-hmm. It's pretty low.
Yeah, it's like a 1 or 2% chance.
Yeah, and then, but because of that, you weren't going to have other kids. Is that right? Because of the risk potentially?
Oh, yeah. So what we wound up doing is we were going to wait and see how our carrier testing came out. Yeah. And we did get carrier tested. And when we both found out that we were definitely carriers for them, at that point, we decided we can't have any more biological children, which we didn't think would be a problem because I had infertility and,
So you go through that. decide you're not going to have any more biological children.
Yes.
Go into an adoption process, right?
Yeah, and that was a long time in the making.
Right.
Kanan did not want any more kids.
Oh, okay. So you had to do some convincing.
I had to do some work on that.
Yeah. And to sum it up, and then you go back and deep dive it a little bit.
Yeah.
You are in the adoption process, pretty far along.
Yes.
Have a child, I think, selected, or at least a location.
We were going to adopt from Bulgaria. We were about to submit our dossier to the Bulgarian government.
Yeah. And then you find out.
I want to say we were maybe like $5,000 or $6,000 in, and we had our home study, and we were committed. We were ready. Right. I had a little girl in Bulgaria.
Right.
That was in my mind.
Right.
The way that I saw it. I don't know if Kanan was, quite to that point, but he was, on board.
Right.
And so, and then I found out I'm pregnant.
Right. And you weren't trying to this time, right?
No, I couldn't get pregnant.
Right.
So it was just like the biggest shock of my life.
Right. And if you could just kind of talk through, like we talked about how all that transpired and everything.
So we had Caleb was in Cub Scouts at the time. And so it was like Pinewood Derby or whatever.
Yeah.
And so Kanan says I was not very nice at that time. And that's how I knew I was pregnant. And so we had taken Caleb to that. And I was just like, well, I'm late, but I'm late. I'm always late. It's not unusual for me. And so I was like, but what if, know? And so I had always, as much as I knew I shouldn't get pregnant, I had always wanted to have that experience again.
Right.
To get pregnant and have the pregnancy and be a mom and all that. And so I was like, well, let's just go to the dollar store and get a pregnancy test. And my mom had come to the Pinewood Derby with us. And so she just took Caleb to like Barnes and Noble or something like that. And Kanan and I went and got the pregnancy test. We went home. I took it. It was positive. I said a lot of words. They were happy words.
Right, yeah.
But I was so shocked. I never, ever expected it would actually happen.
Right. And it happens. So after you find out you're pregnant, you're in the adoption process there. And you ended up having to, went away from the adoption because of what you did with, with your daughter. So
what our thought process was, and we had talked about it, so with every pregnancy with SMA, there's a 1 in 4 chance for the baby to have SMA because Kanan and I are carriers. So that's why I mentioned that interesting fact about, with Caleb, I had 4.
Right.
And then the 1 in 4 was Caleb with SMA. And now, here we are. We've got a baby. We got a 75% chance this baby's going to be healthy.
Right.
And I was like, there's no way she's going to have SMA.
Right.
The odds are in our favor. And so, but we decided we were going to have, get it diagnosed anyway, have amniocentesis. It wouldn't have affected, the what we did with the pregnancy. We just wanted to know.
Right.
And so we had amniocentesis in May of 2015. And let's see if I can remember this all up. And early May, actually. And then I think it was late May, I got the phone call sitting outside of my son's physical therapy, and I'm, loading him up in his wheelchair in our wheelchair van, and it had taken long.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, it's not supposed to take this long. And the genetic counselor got on the phone, and she was like, I'm so sorry. She has SMA. And I was just like, how is that even possible?
Right. Going back into that disbelief and not wanting to believe it's true. Yeah. So you find out she has SMA. You're in the middle of the adoption process still at this time. Right.
And thanks for getting me back on track.
And you decided not to follow through with that.
We were, if she had not had SMA, we were going to continue the adoption process. But when we found out she had SMA, it's like, okay, we have 2 special needs children. And, even the healthiest adopted child in the world is special needs because they have the trauma of abandonment, and that would be 3 special needs children. And we just didn't feel like our family was equipped to take that on. So we had to terminate our adoption contract.
So, you have the double whammy there, if you will. You find out your expected daughter, SMA, and then you're the one that you have that you're going to adopt. You have to make a very rational decision there, right? To not adopt, and because you don't know that what's going to be like with Harper, right?
Right. What we were expecting is, we're going to have 2 kids in wheelchairs.
Right. Yeah. But that's not the case,
no.
right?
That is not the case.
It's not at all a sad story here, right? Because let's discuss the treatments that she's taking and how she's doing.
For sure. So it was the craziest thing. You know how you were talking about coincidences earlier? This is one of those. I mean, if you ever believe there was a God thing, this is a God thing. I found out on Facebook that a doctor in Orlando was recruiting pre-symptomatic, see if I can say this right, pre-symptomatic babies diagnosed with SMA in utero. So babies that haven't been born yet and that have an SMA diagnosis. So which we did, because we'd done the amniocentesis for a clinical trial. So he's recruiting them for a clinical trial. I find out about it. I call and they pre-screen us for the trial and say, okay, well, it looks like you're good. And so we decided, we were going to give it a try.
And all that's after she's born, right? That you go into, it's not while
yes, right. Yes. So it was, the pre-symptomatic part was after birth. So, the more severe forms of SMA are usually symptomatic upon birth.
On birth.
But the chances are typically in families, the SMA type is the same. So there was a pretty strong prediction that she would be a type 2.
Okay.
And the symptoms are not usually present at birth. So as long as she was asymptomatic, she could be enrolled in the trial. That was really, the big criteria. Right. And so we decided that, we would go down there after she was born. I didn't go into labor. I was induced and they a little bit early, and I called them and they said, well, can you come down here, like 2 days after she's born?
Right.
I was like, no. We really thought about it.
Yeah.
But it was just, we could not do it.
Right.
And so we took the chance, that was she going to be showing symptoms in 2 weeks, and was she not going to be able to go in the trial? It was a chance that we, felt comfortable taking. And I do remember this is kind of cool, but all the doctors and just us in our experiences with Harper, how strong she was, how incredibly strong she was at birth. Unbelievable. So strong.
So you end up going to Orlando, right? And she gets enrolled in the trial. And how's she doing now?
She's doing great.
Yeah.
She has been getting these injections since she was 2 weeks old. And they do like a loading schedule. So they get a few right back to back, and then they go every 4 months after that. And she has met her milestones. She's walking, she's running, she's doing parkour.
Oh.
So it's not 100%. She does have some little residual things, but compared to what it could have been.
Right. And what's the outlook long term?
I don't really know.
They don't know yet.
They don't know.
So she's probably one of the first ones that does this. So she's just like a case study
for sure
as she goes through
her
whole life.
They continue to extend the clinical trial, and there's a part of me that wonders if they're just going to keep doing it, into adulthood.
Right.
Because, it's just some of the first kids that have been able to be pre-symptomatic and have this treatment, from the beginning.
Well, that's great that's.
Oh my gosh.
Because, that takes a little weight off of you.
It does.
If you had 2 wheelchair bound kids, you would do it. You've been through everything, but.
For sure.
Yeah, maybe at some point you kind of had I finally got a break.
Oh, yeah.
Here. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Really did.
And just lean into that faith a little bit more.
Absolutely. I had so many people and friends that were praying for Harper to be healed. And, I don't know where I stand on healing, but I know God uses medicine.
Right.
And I just she wasn't healed per se.
Right.
But look at her.
Yeah.
Just unbelievable.
And I'll say, so when we spoke on the phone, I've known Kanan for a long time. You're an incredibly resilient person. You've been through a lot through Kanan, through your kids, through everything. But even you kind of admitted you kind of had kind of reached a breaking point at one point on there. And I'm really big on mental health and taking care of yourself and mental health and how important it is and how often we overlook it and don't ask for help. And can you just talk about it a little bit and what that meant for you and what it took for you to finally say, hey, I need some help here.
I need help. Well, I have a history of depression. So I had depression in college and saw a counselor and was on medication. And then I kind of had struggled with it some throughout life. And I realized that I was depressed.
Right.
And that I had probably been depressed for at least a year, maybe 2. And
is this recent, by the way? It is.
It was a year ago.
Okay. Yeah. Just for some perspective.
It was a year ago. And, I think part of that was just because I had put so much on myself for so long,
right?
To do everything that I could and that I was supposed to be able to do it alone. I don't know where we get that mindset.
Right.
Think about that quote.
Yeah.
No man is an island.
Right.
Why do we think we're supposed to be, why do we think we are not supposed to need help?
Right.
And so Caleb had just gotten another diagnosis of severe sleep apnea. And that's the thing with SMA is like the hits just keep coming.
Yeah, it's another respiratory thing on top of it.
Yeah. So he had been diagnosed with that. My mom had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I was dealing with health issues. I've dealt with health issues for years. I can't remember if I had been diagnosed with POTS by then or not. But, health issues that cause like a lot of fatigue and then stuff like that. And so I just reached a point where I was just so sad. Caleb gives me a hard time because he's like, Mom, stop don't be like this. My heart just breaks over and over every day because of what he faces, what he goes through.
Right.
And if you could see that kid when he has his back surgeries and the staples in his back, he had 80 something staples in his back. The courage and the strength, you see the pictures and the smiles, like the highlight reels, but you don't see the agony, the kind of agony that this kid goes through.
And that's probably some of the reason you don't ask for help, because you say, if Caleb's going through this, who am I, right?
Maybe. Yeah. I can't complain about back pain to him. We have this joke. I'll be like, man, my back's really hurting. He's like, really, Mom? I'm like, sorry, buddy. So, just, just when you have a kind of trauma that repeats itself, so like with childhood, all your kids your friends' kids are meeting these milestones. They're going on to do these things. They're playing football. Caleb loves football.
Right.
Oh my gosh, and he actually plays adaptive football. But, for me and for Kanan, there's just this grief of what will never be for Caleb, and it just, as you grow up and the kids are doing new things, it's like one more thing. And so dealing with that kind of grief, has just, I guess, worn me out.
Yeah, it gets heavy. Gets heavy. Yeah.
And then the physical demands, of taking care of special needs children, worth every second.
Right.
And for the longest time, I thought my purpose in life was to be Caleb's legs.
Right.
So I would, try to hold him in the bouncy house and help him jump. And, I reached a point where I realized I can't be Caleb's legs.
Right.
And so there was some acceptance for that. And then there was also just that knowledge that I had to let people help me.
Right.
And I'm a 2 on the Enneagram. So that means I am the helper.
Right.
That's what I do.
Right.
And part of that is healthy. It's how I take care of myself. But the other part of it is that's how I avoid my own pain.
Right.
And so it was just, getting therapy, have a therapist and psychiatrist who manages my medications and learning how to take care of myself. And at that point, when I was having my breakdown, I was actually considering driving to the Bradley Center. Yeah. But I got my therapist on the phone, And she was talking with me, and she's like, I think we need to get Kanan on here. And so we got Kanan on. I think we were all like FaceTiming or whatever together. And at the time, I didn't understand what she meant, but she's like, in terms of activation right now, on a scale of 1 to 10, Kari's at a 10.
Yeah.
And you can't go anywhere. He was about to leave to go on a trip for work, and Kanan was like, huh? And so we had that whole process. He took maybe a week or so off work just to be home with me so that we could set up some help for me.
Right.
One of the things we did was have somebody come clean the house. I reached out to people that could help me with childcare. We asked people to bring us meals. It was just like we're at this critical point,
right?
Especially me. And, that was really a transition period, because from that point, up to that point, I feel like I was sort of the force that kept everything going with Caleb's care and our family. And now we flip-flop.
Right.
And so now Kanan has really taken on that role. And so, I'm starting to see in him some of the same signs that I saw in me. And so it's like, okay, we've got to find a way.
Balance. Try to
find balance, for sure.
Yeah, which is difficult. But you're right. The first step is asking for help. Or really, first step is realizing you need it.
You need it.
And then instead of acting in some irrational way, you act rationally and ask for help, right? Which is difficult. And I just appreciate you sharing it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
To kind of wrap up here, I'll ask you the question I ask everybody. If you could go all the way back and talk to that 20-year-old you, what advice would you give her?
I really thought about that when I was looking at the question, and I was like, gosh, what would I say? And I was like, I really want to come up with something profound that's going to sound good. And I was like, the real truth is I would probably say nothing. I wouldn't tell myself anything.
That's honesty right there.
Or I would tell myself to work harder in school.
Yeah.
Because I was in college and I didn't take it seriously.
Yeah.
And I was too interested in all the other stuff.
Right.
And so, but I was like, what if I had taken college more seriously? I probably wouldn't have met Kanan.
That's true. Yeah. What were the second and third order effects be? And then not put words in your mouth or anything, but there's probably some thought in that. I know I had it. You can always go back to college and do things, but you had things in your life that took priority over you that you had to do, and you never got to go back and address that, right? That was yourself. Yeah. So I really appreciate you doing this. Sure. It was amazing. Your stories, fun talking to you. Your stories, amazing. Both of your stories are amazing. And I think if anything, you can if you listen to this, it doesn't matter what you're going through or what you've been through, you can get through it, right? You can get through it. And you were able to do it with Kanan, right? Not without trial, I'm sure, right? But make sure you lean on somebody, find somebody, and ask for help if you need help. Because
asking for help is not weakness.
Yeah, people want to help. They really do, right? It's just they don't know where. They
don't know how.
They don't know how unless you are, you show them where you need the help. And
that's right.
I appreciate it. I know that people are going to like this episode, and hopefully,
hope it meets the expectations.
Even if one person,
so
man or woman, listens to this and finds something in it that says, "I need help," or "I can get through today because of Kari's story," it's amazing. And for everybody out there, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and check in with us on the next episode. Thanks, Kari. It was fun.
Thank you.